Hi, I'm Lihao. Let's talk about some examples using Svelte actions. And today we're going to talk about one example, which is using Svelte actions to integrate with this UI library called Popper.js. Why am I talking about Popper.js in specific? Well, the last time when I did this video about using Svelte actions to create tooltip, someone commented on Reddit about if you want to use Popper.js, which allows you to create dynamic tooltip that overflows, and I click into look at the implementation of that Svelte Popper.js by Brian Lee, and I find that it's pretty interesting. You can take a look at it if you want, but we're going to do it on ourselves. Why is it so interesting is that if you take a look at the Popper.js API, you import a create Popper from Popper.js core, and you pass two elements in this Popper.js API, which is the one is the tooltip, the elements, and then the second one will be the tooltip, right? So you wrap this API, you call this API with two elements. And remember, when we use actions, we only apply it on one element. So what if you want to apply it to two elements like this Popper.js, and how would you do it? And that is what we are going to try it out in this example. Right. So over here, I have my REPL open up. Let me split it on half so that, can look it side by side. What we're going to do here is I'm going to copy this whole chunk of code over here, and I'm going to create use Popper .js, which we're going to export an action called use Popper. And an action is a function that takes in an element and a params, and it returns, and it could return an object that has like updates and destroy. And over here, we're going to import the Popper.js, which we're going to take in, if you call create Popper, we need to take in two elements, right? One is the elements, and the other one is the tooltip, right? And probably we also need to copy this, which is the placement on top, right? So now we have a problem, right? Where do we get tooltip, right? If you use Popper with this element, how do we get the tooltip? Or whether is this elements the tooltip but not the element? Yeah, so the thing is we can only apply an action to one element, and how are we going to do that if your API requires two elements, right? So this is something we're gonna explore now. But in the meantime, I'm gonna say div and then use Popper, right? I'm gonna add some words over here. Hello world. Right, so tooltip is undefined. So how do we do it? So let's think about how we would want our API to look like. So let's imagine our API. So if this is the element that when we hover will show a tooltip, then we probably will also have another element, which is the tooltip itself, right? And we would also want to apply some sort of actions over here, right? So that probably this is like Popper tooltip, and this is the Popper element, in such the way that, this is the element that when we hover, they will show a tooltip, and this is the tooltip itself. And so that we can get two elements and then apply the action to it. So if we're going to have two actions that are in a pair, why don't we create a function that returns this pair of action? What if we have a function that looks like this? Probably it returns an array of actions, array of two actions. So the array will contain two elements. First is the action for the elements, and then the next would be the action for the tooltip. And probably here I will call something like a create Popper action. 可啦。So probably here we will have a create popper action. So probably here we will have the create popper action, and that will return us 2 actions. And these 2 actions should work in a pair, where once the action is applied on both elements, we get both elements only. We call this create popper API from the Popper.js core. And so let's take a look how we can implement this, right? So now we have imagined our API. Let's come back over here and think about how we can write this. We will have a create popper function. So I'm going to say a function called create popper action, and it should return us an array of 2 action, right? The first action is called the use popper element. So use popper element. And the next action is called the use popper tooltip, right? Use popper tooltip. And these two are actions, so they both takes elements and params, which in our case probably we're just gonna ignore the params for now, and you're gonna return these 2 action over here. So these 2 should work like a pair. And we'll take a look at how we're gonna implement this. Right, so this we're gonna make it as our default export. So we're gonna remove whatever is here, and we're gonna call this a create popper action for the use popper. Right, so now let's come back to the use popper. Let's open up a bit over here. We are going to call this function action. This action will be called when the popper element is mounted, but at that time the tooltip element may not be mounted. Right, so we want to have like a reference somewhere, like the popper element and the popper tooltip, and we're gonna assign this element whenever the element itself is mounted. So we're gonna say this is this, and this is this element. And because doing so, we will now probably want to have a function that is the actual create popper. I'm gonna say initialize popper. So because create popper is here already. So initialize popper. So this function will be called in both actions. So we don't care about which order of like popper element is defined or popper tooltip is defined, but we're gonna call it on both sides, and we only do our thing when both popper element and popper tooltip is ready, right? So if this function is called first, then popper element may be ready, but popper tooltip may not. Or if this is called first, then popper tooltip is ready, but popper element is not. So only the second time when we call initialize popper after in both actions where the popper both element and the tooltip is ready. So I'm gonna say popper element and popper tooltip is ready. What I call the create popper API. Right. Let's see here. Let's see. Process is not defined. I believe this Popper.js core itself is using some process environment. What I can do, I have a hack here, is that define process JS. I'm gonna say window.process equals to env production. Wait, no. So this is, just ignore me, this is gonna be a hack. And we're gonna import this define process first. Yep. So yeah, probably let me explain a bit on this hack. Basically, we're going to define process as the global variable, which is the nth. Node nth is production, because I know that in some library they like to access process.nth.node nth, as they assume that this is being imported in Node.js, as well as your bundlers like Webpack or Rollup understand this process.nth, but not in the browser, right? So we're going to define this right before we import our use popper, which imports this popper.js, which itself is using that process. So now, as you can see, this is showing up over here. I believe this is working. Let's see, placement, top end. Would it be because the hello world is... Goodness, okay, how about let's try bottom start. Bot placement, bottom start. Right, yeah, so probably the default placement is over that right corner now is bottom start. So this is the placements and all the params. Probably we would also want to pass it in somewhere. We can decide whether we want to pass it in the popper element or popper tooltip, but decide only one. Because, you know, what happens if you pass two conflicting params on both sides? How are you going to reconcile that? So I probably would want to pass it in the tooltip element, because it feels like it's a tooltip related params. So over here, I'm going to say popper params equals to params. So I'm going to define this over here. And I'm going to replace it over here. Right, so after replace it, I'll probably have to pass it myself. So it's at the proper tooltip. I'm gonna say equals to placement bottom start. And now it's back to the bottom start again. Right, so if you are curious why is there two curly braces, well, the first the outermost curly brackets is just telling that this is what is within is an expression, and the one inside is just like an object. Right, so the expression is an object. So we say use popper tooltip, and we have params. And over here we do popper equals params, right? That means that we're accepting params here. We also need to be prepared that, you know, there will be an update. Whenever you're using an params, be sure that you also define an update method, because params itself can change. Right? If you don't have it over here, then yeah, we don't have to care about. But if you are taking params here, yes, please define the new params. Let's say popper.params equals the new params. But at the same time, we would also want to, like, changing it, this alone wouldn't affect the popper here. So probably we'd also have to look up and the popper API documentation to see whether how we are going to update the params. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna guess probably it's in over here, create popper, and see, let's see, instance, updates, set options. I would believe this is the options, right? So set options takes in an option, right? A shape of options, right? So probably it's this one. I'm gonna come over here and say popper.set options with each the popper params. But what is popper? Well, popper would be this instance of after we create a popper, right? So I'm gonna come over here and say popper equals to create popper. Let popper. Right. So now if you okay, see, let's try and see. So buttons. Let's make placement variable. I'm gonna say starts. I'm gonna replace this placement over here. And I'm gonna have a button that click me. That when I click, we'll change the placement to say let's see. What other placement you have on the right, right? Let's try on the right. Equals right. So when I click, yeah, it's on the right, right? Okay, it works, right? So make sure when you take in the params, please be sure that you also define updates so that it feels good, where you can dynamically change whatever is inside the params and see it reflected immediately, right? If you don't have updates defined, then it will not update itself. So as you can see over here, when we're looking at the APIs, we also see a destroy, which is to clean up the instance, which means that whenever an API provides a way to clean up, we also need to do our own cleanup, which is over here. We will have to define the destroy to do a cleanup. And so if popper, because we can destroy this tooltip as well as this popper element, so we're gonna extract that method out, just like how we say initialize popper, right? So I'm gonna say destroy popper. Over here, I will copy the same thing as well over here, and then also once we are destroying, then probably we'll say popper tooltip is null, and over here we're gonna say popper element is null, so that we don't hold the same reference again. We release the reference from this action pair, and destroy popper. Let's define this function destroy popper, and I'm gonna say if we still have popper, then popper dot destroy and we also popper equals null, so that if you call destroy multiple times, it's not gonna call the destroy API anymore. So how do we validate this? So probably we have show tooltip as a variable. We're gonna say true by default. Gonna come here and gonna probably have the tooltip as dynamically shown whether this show tooltip is true or false, right? And the easiest way to check true false is to have a checkbox. Bind check equals to show tooltip. So when we turn it off, the tooltip should be hidden, and we turn it on, it should show and hide. And we say click me, which change our placement to the right, and when we show, it should be on the right, right? So that's about it. I've shown you how you can integrate the Popper.js using action. And in this case, why is it so special is that Popper.js library takes in 2 elements, and usually an actions only take in 1. So you would have to create an action pair in this case, where you have 2 actions and they have to work together to create the Popper tooltip, right? And so, as I said, you can return an array of 2 actions, and to coordinate between the actions, you would have to kind of abstract like the initialization or destroy function, where you would have to check during initialization is to check whether if both elements are present, only you create the popper. And when you destroy, make sure that as long as one is being called, you will destroy it once and you don't destroy multiple times, because both elements can be hidden at the same time. You only destroy once, right? And then also when you have 2 actions that potentially can take in params, you have to decide which action to take in params, or you kind of like split into some params to be configured on the one action and some to the other, or you just make all params to be configured on only one action. Well, this is because it will be slightly harder if you want to reconcile the params. What if both actions params, one says that you need to place on the right, one says you need to place on the left. You need to come up with a way to reconcile that. And in either case, I don't feel it makes sense. Like why must tooltip takes priority than the popper element, right? So an easier way is to say popper element will not take any params and popper tooltip will take all the params. And once you're taking params, make sure that you have an update methods so that you can make sure your params is dynamically reflect the library under the hood. Right, so that's about it. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have anything you are unsure about, you want to discuss or ask me about, comments down below. And as always, subscribe to my channel so that the next video is out, you are the first one to get notified. So see you, bye bye.